Another week, another tragedy in America. A black mother of 4 in Florida allegedly killed by her neighbor who shot her through the front door. We've got the details. Every single detail is gonna make this story more heart-wrenching than the one before it. Ajike Owens is the mother. We don't have that much information about the one who did the shooting, but identified in some cases as a 58-year-old white woman, although I believe that the cops are not being super clear about more details about her. But many of the neighbors have talked about the experience with this particular woman in the past, how she has harassed and berated and called the cops on kids in the area. Obviously, things went way further in this case. Ben Crump now representing the family of the slain. You can see here a message of him showing a photo of her and giving the basic ideas of the story. So the basic idea is that Owens' children had been playing in this sort of shared grassy area that for whatever reason, this white woman apparently believed was her sole property. One of her children left a tablet in the area. The woman apparently took it, stole it effectively. And when Ajike Owens went to recover it, the woman shot her. There was, according to witnesses, according to the kids, there was no threats. Ajike Owens didn't have a weapon or anything like that. There was no justification for any violence, let alone lethal violence. But anyway, why don't we run through a little bit more of the information? So there had been a dispute between Owens' children and the neighbor on Friday, the day of the shooting. Owens went to the shooter's house to confront her about striking one of her children with a pair of roller skates. People at the scene told police that Owens had begun knocking on her neighbor's door when a weapon was fired from within the home. Bullets went through the front door and hit Owens. Owens staggered back and collapsed beneath a tree, calling 911 as she did. When police arrived, people were gathered around her trying to give her medical aid. They began screaming that the shooter was inside of the residence. The alleged shooter stayed in her house until police arrived and took her into custody. And apparently, not only had the police already been called multiple times on this particular woman over the last few years, but a lot of people incredibly frustrated as they are in this sort of case when the police appear to have just released the woman. Neighbors say that they saw her drinking coffee on her porch the next morning, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't through a door, ambushed someone and shot her to death in front of her own children. It reminds me in some cases, Dan, of some of the other stories that we've talked about of people being killed simply for pulling into the wrong driveway, knocking on the wrong door. In this case, it seems more targeted. There had been a history here, but what do you make of it?
Yeah, what I make of it is it's one of those other scary things about how do you expect certain people to just exist in this country? Like I would love to say that I'm remembering and recalling around where this happened in Florida, right? Yeah, so stand your ground state. We'll get to more details about that in a moment. But yeah, sometimes I get kind of tired of living in the city and I think about, what would it be like if I, moved to the suburbs or moved to like a more quieter rural area and had places for a supposed family of mine to like go around and like frolic and things like that. But then I have to go about, what if I have to knock on a door the wrong day and like that's the end? Like these are things that you don't have to think about really in a lot of other countries, even a lot of other parts of this country. But this is a story that has happened so very often where it seems like it is another story where gun violence just goes too extreme. And what I was gonna say there was that this seems like a case where, okay, you have this woman, she's being called a lot of times, she's a problem and stuff like that. Why are there no wellness checks done? Why are we not checking to see like what weapons she does have? In a society where we do have some sort of, not gun confiscation, but making sure that people who have a history or a past are not likely to use their guns to commit violence in the future. This would have been a stunning example of when to potentially use that, not like you're getting that in Florida.
No, 100%. Yeah, to Nikki Haley's point yesterday, but I don't trust the government to determine who should lose a gun. Well, you also don't think that the cops should be able to take the gun away. Cops have been called multiple times. They've heard about the violence and everything. If the cops were worried that someday they're gonna show up and they're gonna get shot through the door, you want them to have nothing they can do to have those guns taken away. So let's be very clear about that. Now, you've noted that this is Florida, which takes us to our next wrinkle in the story. Some of you listening to this who don't know the details might think, well, that is as bad as the story could be. No, it can get worse. It can get worse than as of when we're filming this, there being no charges being filed, because it is possible that none will ever be filed because again, it's Florida and you know what they have in Florida? They have stand your ground. The law states that a person can use deadly force if they reasonably believe it could prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to himself or herself or another. And now is the point in the story where many of you might think, well, what the hell does that have to do with this? There was no threat of violence, there was no capacity for violence, and how can you say that you were terrified of great bodily harm when you were firing at someone, striking them, potentially killing their kid through a door? Well, it's Florida. That's really all that matters. Like the fact that it doesn't apply is also, that's true. It doesn't seem to apply, but it also was designed to give white people an excuse for murdering black people. That's what the law was actually designed to do. And in this case, that applies. It would be very convenient for conservatives in Florida to have another out for the murder of AJ Owens. So I could see that potentially applying. The fact that it says reasonably that you would believe that you might die has never once been tested. No one has ever had to demonstrate that their fear was reasonable. All they had to do was claim that the fear existed in the first place.
In fact, a famous counterexample from the Trayvon Martin case, because George Zimmerman used the stand your ground law famously in Florida to get away with what he did with Trayvon Martin. There was a similar case where I believe there was a woman in Florida who was under a domestic violence situation with her husband and then fired a warning shot in the garage in the air, and she was arrested and charged. Even though you could have said, like, in that case, there's a credible threat that she felt to her husband at that time. And it wasn't even shooting her husband, it was a warning, I have a gun firing in the air shot. That apparently the little shingles that got destroyed, that's enough property damage for the state of Florida to get you arrested in the state of stand your ground law, but not enough to be a reasonable threat. So yeah, it's a really kind of terrible turn of events here. I hope there's some justice for this family, but no justice is enough to have your mom gone like that.
Yeah, to have witnessed it as a young kid
over an iPad.
Video of the 100%. I watched the AJ Owens' mother, like talking about the experience of having raised her and then losing. It's devastating, completely pointless. This woman never should have had a gun, 100%. And anyone who acts the way that she does not need to have a gun. Should be taken away, because if you don't, there's a very good chance that they will either be hurt with it or they will hurt someone else. In this case, unfortunately, the system failed. I mean, the system as designed succeeded. This is what conservatives want, but from a human point of view, it has failed.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.